All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about something that was completely invisible, buried deep inside company databases, that somehow managed to bring the entire global supply chain to a grinding halt. It's a story all about hidden flaws and absolutely massive consequences. So, this whole story really kicks off with a crisis that I'm pretty sure almost all of you felt, whether you were trying to buy a new car, a phone, or heck, even a refrigerator. We're talking about the Great Chip Drought. It really felt like it happened overnight. One minute, things are moving along just fine, and the next, bam, a dead stop. The engine of global commerce just completely seized up. And you could see the effects everywhere. I mean, it wasn't some abstract economic thing. You had these massive lots just full of brand new cars, sitting there waiting for a few tiny little microchips. The latest phones, suddenly impossible to find. And in the background, the very servers that run our digital world were on backorder. It was a total system-wide shutdown. Now look, the easy answer here is to blame the pandemic, right? And sure, that was the spark, but it wasn't the root cause. The real problem, the weakness that the pandemic so brutally exposed, was something much, much deeper. It was a fundamental issue with how companies were seeing, or maybe more accurately, not seeing, their own data. And the price tag for this invisibility? Just staggering. We're talking over $500 billion in lost economic activity across the globe. That's not just a number on a screen. That's lost jobs, delayed projects, and real pain for people and businesses, all because of this hidden data problem. And the ripples from this just kept spreading. It wasn't just about money. We're talking millions of cars that just didn't get built. Governments had to scramble to create emergency task forces just to figure out where the chips were. And it created this huge, urgent demand for what everyone started calling supply chain transparency, a demand to finally see what was actually going on. Okay, so this gets us to the real heart of the matter. This whole mess, it wasn't really a failure of ships or trucks. It was a failure of visibility, a failure to see the traffic jam before the entire system drove right into it. And the villain in our story? Well, it's got a name: data fragmentation. Think about it like this. Your company's inventory data is in one system, your shipping logistics are in a totally different one, and your supplier information is in yet another. And none of these systems can talk to each other. They're in their own little informational silos. You can't run a global supply chain like that. And this right here shows you exactly how it all fell apart. Before the shock, everything seemed fine. Companies were running on this super efficient but incredibly fragile just-in-time model. But their data was so siloed that all their forecasting was really just guesswork. The moment the shock hit, that fragile system didn't just bend, it shattered. Visibility went to zero and companies were flying completely blind. So you have to ask, right? How on earth did we build something so broken? To get that, we need to take a quick look back at the history of how these supply chain databases were built, one messy piece at a time. Well, this mess was decades in the making. Back in the 80s, you had spreadsheets and faxes. Basically just paper moving around slowly. The 90s brought these big centralized systems, which was an improvement, but they were super rigid. Then in the 2000s, we tried to connect everything with portals and APIs, but the integration was always a step behind. The key here is that every new technology was just another patch on an old system. And what you end up with is a patchwork, a giant tangled mess of data silos. And this quote just nails it perfectly. Supply chains weren't operating like a single, smart, unified database. They were just a collection of different things stitched together. And when one of those stitches ripped, the whole thing just fell apart. All right, so after all that chaos, what's the lesson? What did we learn from getting stuck in the biggest economic traffic jam of our lifetime? This is probably the single most important takeaway. Everyone thought this was a shipping problem or a manufacturing problem. It wasn't. At its absolute core, this was a failure in how we design our data systems. It was a data architecture failure. End of story. And once you know the real problem, the solution becomes pretty clear. This is basically the blueprint for how to build a system that doesn't break. Databases have to be unified and work in real time. We have to stop guessing based on what happened last year and start forecasting with live data. And maybe most importantly, we have to start treating data fragmentation not as some IT headache, but as the massive systemic risk it truly is. So, this whole thing leaves us with one final thought. This problem of these invisible, patched-together systems,
It's not just in the global supply chain. It is everywhere. So the real question is, what invisible patchworks are hiding out there in your world, just waiting for a little push to fall apart?